Welcome to the Wellness for Women show, where we talk about life, weight loss and everything in between. I'm Faye Caseman, founder of the AAA Way Life and Weight Loss Programme, and I'm here to help you put together the pieces of life and weight loss for one last time. This is an episode of the Wellness for Women show, filmed live in the free Facebook group. Hello, and welcome to the Wellness for Women show. And today we have a very special guest. Marie Herbert is here to talk to us about, well, I'll let Marie explain herself in a moment, but Marie has made the transition from working in education to setting up her own business at the age of 49. This followed in the footsteps of a late ADHD diagnosis, and now aged 52 years young, she is on her way to rediscovering the person that she always felt that she could and was meant to be, and is also helping others on their journey and self-discovery process. And progress even. So Marie, tell everybody listening a little bit more about you, because it's always best if you can hear it from you directly.
So I was in education for about 25 years. I had about, I haven't actually added all the jobs up. I think last time I tried to, I got to almost 30 jobs. When I actually went to the doctors about thinking I had ADHD, that was one of the bits of evidence I gave.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I had about 30 jobs. I've done about 7 postgraduate qualifications, 4 or more, 2 handfuls probably of professional qualifications too. And yeah, I got the diagnosis of ADHD following diagnosis of anxiety, following HRT, perimenopause, and when it was obvious that there was still something else not quite right, and following actually, because I worked in education as an English teacher, as a SENCO, as a dyslexia assessor, but in my role as a SENCO at school where I knew that they had challenges with children with ADHD, I went and got on some training for ADHD, thinking it was just generic. And from the very first sentence, it was actually Tony, forgotten his name, Tony from the ADHD Foundation delivering the training. And from the first sentence, which was the focus of the presentation, was on ADHD and girls. And from the very first sentence, I knew he was talking about me.
Yeah.
And my jaw just dropped, and I spent the whole day with my mouth wide open. I'd worked in special needs for most of my education career, so 25 years plus, and never thought of myself as ADHD until that point. It was and it was strange because, and I think this is a pattern with people with ADHD, you think that everybody else is the same as you, especially when you're either, because there's 3 types of ADHD: the predominantly hyperactive, the predominantly inattentive, and the combination, which is me. And when you're the hyperactive, the people who are predominantly hyperactive, it's a lot more obvious, and those are the boys typically that get diagnosed early on in their lives, and the rest of us, men and women, who have more inattentive symptoms are less likely to get diagnosed. And I've completely forgotten what I was saying, so this is an ADHD thing. What was I saying? I don't know what the point of that was. Completely lost my thread.
It's absolutely fine. I understand that well as well. We were just basically just saying how you'd got your diagnosis and how you resonated with the training that you were having and identified, and how you're coming into yourself now, and what it is that you
that whole thing about feeling. So the experiences, what I've come to realise is that my experience is shared by a lot of men and women who are late diagnosed, or who are thinking, or ADHD curious, as I call it, and people that are thinking they might be ADHD and wondering if they're going to do a diagnosis. And that feeling on the periphery of life, even when you're in the middle of it, it's not because you haven't got friends, it's not because you haven't got a job, but something just doesn't match up. And to feel that strange energy where everything's just misaligned all the time, that can be draining, emotionally draining, physically draining, stressful. anxiety inducing, which I think is why a lot of people end up getting diagnosed with anxiety before they get diagnosed with ADHD. What happened to me is fairly typical of a lot of adults who get diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah. I was just saying to Marie before we went live, I think, again, I've forgotten whether it was before I hit the live button or after I hit the live button, that I know people who've been diagnosed in adulthood. I know people who are going through and considering diagnosis. And so it certainly is quite prevalent. And I myself, I've had curiosity at times as to whether I may or may not have ADHD or ADHD type symptoms. And one thing that through my own research is about, again, understanding that, again, it does present very differently in girls to boys, typically, with sort of girls, daydreamers who sort of were staring out the window at school kind of scenario. And of course, like with any condition, you've got the ability to start to mask some of those symptoms and find coping mechanisms along the way, or believe that you have. And so sometimes, again, that can mask a situation.
Well, you think that's what everybody's doing.
Yeah.
It came as a revelation to me when I realized that wasn't what everybody else was doing. That can, I don't know, it's kind of, I don't know, these sort of things I don't say that often really, but you know, especially as a teenager and at university, it's almost like rehearsing situations, rehearsing what you're going to say in different situations, having stock phrases that you use when you meet people, when you see people. And it's not unusual to experience that, because it's just that, social awkwardness. You misjudge situations, you say things without thinking, it's like you just, I don't know, thinking back now, I suppose it's like your brain's just going in overdrive all the time, trying to anticipate other people and your own behaviors as well. Maybe that's the thing that's so draining. But it's my passion is for helping women who can relate to my story, who feel that they're never quite good enough, and also that untapped potential. Kind of, it's funny because you, on the one hand, you feel like you're not quite good enough, but on the other hand, you feel like you've got loads to give and loads of potential that you just can't, for some reason, it just doesn't happen for you. I mean, there's practical issues, like when I was in education and I would be involved in senior leadership meetings, I couldn't process information quickly enough to contribute. Practical barriers that you experience. And when you don't realize, like now, if I was in that situation, I would ask for information about the meeting beforehand and have that caveat that I might need to contribute, half an hour later, which is typically how long it takes my brain to process information. But so working with women, but also helping schools to work with children, because that's the way to make real changes, I think, in society and children. I mean, I think with teachers, you can't expect all teachers to know everything about every single condition. And I think it's almost like I want to take that pressure away from teachers. So rather than, almost like I want to do the opposite to what you would expect. Yes, to have that insight about ADHD, but not to put yourself and or your staff under pressure to feel like everybody has to be an expert, because at the end of the day, everybody with ADHD, each person with ADHD is individual anyway. And all that's really needed is that acceptance and that understanding that somebody else can experience the world in a completely different way to you. And that doesn't make it wrong, even when they're a child. It doesn't mean it's not true. And you don't have to understand it. You just have to accept it and work with that child so that they feel emotionally safe enough to communicate their challenges and to work together to find the solutions. Quite often, children know what they find difficult and they know what the solutions could be if they're given that opportunity. So that's my mission. That's my general mission, to help in schools to make, really, not only to have children have the chance to not have that sense of low self-worth, low self-esteem, that comes with always striving to be different to how you are. I think that's the main thing. It's trying to advocate so that children feel that they are valued and more than good enough just as they are. And that's all children, obviously.
Yeah.
I think that's just something that's particularly important with children with ADHD. And what I find in my coaching is, that narrative can be flipped quite quickly, because they're used to teenagers that I work with are used to thinking about all the things that they're doing wrong and all the things that they find difficult. And when you flip that to pointing out their strength and saying that, certain things, so what if you find, that you have to do something a certain way, it doesn't matter. It just means you're different. It doesn't mean you're wrong. And it's astounding. I still find it astounding how quickly that turns things around for teenage boys predominantly that I've worked with, like after 3 or 4 sessions, to take that on board, and the narratives flip really quickly. I think there's probably something to do with not wanting to be different as well, and so not really wanting to have support from somebody because of their ADHD. But it's not the end of their journey, but at that stage, at that teenage stage, it's just so valuable for them to hear from somebody else that's not their parents, who they expect to say all the right things, that that points out their values, their skill set and their strengths. So it's a privilege to be able to do that. I love my job. I love being able to work with people and just helping them. It's just kind of permission giving, and I've experienced that as well. In my journey, having that permission to be you is just so valuable. And has such an impact.
Yeah. I think that is, and I think it's very valuable work that you're doing, and I think you're absolutely right. Going in at an early age, and there isn't typically a lot of support, as I understand it, for the schools, for the school age children, and I think a lot can then also be put onto the parents, and the parents aren't necessarily always given the support, and or may even have difficulties themselves, and so then I imagine that can be then a compounding situation as well.
Yeah, I do feel for parents, and ever more increasingly so. When I work with a team, I manage to steer the support that I give towards the parents as well, because there's that whole thing about not being able to fill from an empty cup. And yes, sometimes parents might have undiagnosed ADHD themselves, but there's the challenge of supporting a child who does have differences which may not be fully accommodated or celebrated in different settings. It might make them stand out, might make things difficult socially for them, might make parents respond in a certain way to you as a family, might make teachers respond in a certain way. So there are extra challenges for parents. And and I think for the children that have ADHD and autism combined, that's even more so. It does feel like those parents are often fighting the system. It's hard to get the support that their children need, and it's also long-winded. Everything's a battle. Everything has to be evidenced. Everything has to take time. I used to be a dyslexia assessor and as well, and as a school senko, and it's like you have to almost allow a child to fail, it feels like, until the support can then be put in, because you've got the evidence that they need it, which doesn't seem, it just doesn't seem right.
But at least there are people like yourself in the world who are there, obviously, to try and advocate and step into the bridge and pick up where perhaps sometimes the system doesn't work to help people. And I think you're absolutely right in what you said earlier as well about that individuality, because I think that's sometimes the difficulty that we have in schools, just generally, without getting too much into the school system side of it, I guess, that I can imagine you were a teacher with 30 odd kids in there. You're trying to do you're trying to do your best by everybody, but you've got 30 individuals there, and
Yeah,
sometimes
100%. Yeah.
and sometimes generally kids aren't given that ability to
Yeah.
be individual in those kind of settings, let alone if you are.
Well, and there'll be teachers like me who have ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And, I came out of the education system. I, take my hat off to teachers. I literally couldn't do it. I had very, there are classes that I can remember that I absolutely loved teaching.
Mm-hmm.
But it yeah, when you've got split classes, when you start teaching a class and they're in year 10 and you haven't known them from year
Mm-hmm.
7, it it's a whole different ball game. And then as somebody with ADHD, you're focusing on the behavior in front of you, you're focusing on the teaching, you're focusing on the practical issues like, sorting out the technology. There's so much multitasking that you have to do, plus your own thoughts that might suddenly veer off into a random direction, and you start talking to the kids about something completely unrelated and then realize and then stop. And it's I would like to support teachers as well who have neurodivergence or can relate to those challenges. It is, it's this, the education system hasn't really changed, has it? That
No.
whole concept of one teacher 30 kids, how long have we had that for?
Yeah,
um
for sure.
so,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
and
I
it's
think but I think there's a lot of sectors out there that are definitely crying out for help, and teaching's definitely one of them at times. And again, this is the beauty of this show for me, is that this is about wellness for women, but predominantly, as I was explaining to Marie before she joined, that predominantly I talk about food freedom and intuitive eating, but what's more important to me is that there is a human being behind all of the food. So when we were, working on diets all over the years, it was purely just focusing on the food, what we ate, how we move. Whereas actually, it's about how do we go together as a human being. And so, if you are somebody who is looking to work on their relationship with food, and you've got ADHD or ADD, then you might also find that your path and how you connect with food could be different as well. And so
yeah,
it's one of
100%.
so it's
Yeah,
one of those
so
things that knocks in all areas, isn't it,
yeah,
really?
well, you've got the dopamine hunting, that can be one form of, well, you have sort of self-medication in response to undiagnosed ADHD, which, can be any addictive behaviors, and food is one of them, alcohol
Mm-hmm.
is one of them. Um, and then you've got you can have challenges so some people have sensory challenges, so that can affect your food. And then you can have the whole thing, the overwhelm. So, I'd be quite happy to eat the same thing 4 days on on a trot. But my children are not so impressed with that concept, but it doesn't bother me. And I like that because it's easier. Um, it just doesn't bother me. Eating the same thing over and over again just doesn't bother me, whereas it does bother them.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd probably bother a lot of people. And then, yeah, the trying something new and eating it to death for
Mm-hmm.
a period of time and then never going near it again. So sweet potato, I can't eat. I can't even smell. I fed that to and ate it myself when children were very small as like an early food. Just
Yeah.
makes me heave now. Cook it would just make me heave. Two is another one. I ate that for a while and then stopped. I haven't eaten it for years now.
I haven't
Um,
even seen any in the shops recently, to be fair.
not,
Not adverse to Mange too, but
yeah, so yeah, there's just little behaviours like that, and certain foods, yeah, texture. So certain foods I can't eat raw. I have to eat them soft. It's quite childlike, I think. Actually, I was talking to somebody recently about my eating habit, and yeah, quite childlike. Think I haven't really moved on. I do eat more than I did as a child. I was a very fussy eater, but um, peas have got like huge, like one pea would taste so strong to me.
yeah. Yeah, and it's I think this is where again our worlds in a way can combine, isn't it? Because for me, it's about knowing yourself well, and then looking to see where how that all fits together. And I think possibly similar to how you would perhaps work with people as well, and then obviously getting them to accept and celebrate themselves in that as well, because your eating habits are absolutely perfectly fine, but if there's things that people want to change, then obviously it's about exploring that, but with love and curiosity. That's again my important message, is not beating yourself up, so, but just again knowing yourself well. But again, this is where if you did have somebody who was trying to do or follow a particular diet, and it had all the foods that you didn't like, it was the mange tout and sweet potato diet, you'd be screwed. So and so it's about being able to build your own system, really. But yeah. And so just going back to you, I took over a bit with the food stories a bit, but where that me and Marie met is that it's belief coding. So we're both in the belief coding community. And so I know that Marie, you've had a lot of success using belief coding for yourself and clients, I believe. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So that's been a real deal breaker for me, the belief coding. I signed up in August and the shifts have been fast and furious. So working on self-love really is what it comes down to: self-acceptance, self-belief, all the different layers of the onion that involves. And I wouldn't say I've got there completely, because I think it's a lifelong learning process. And but yeah, it wasn't that long ago that to spend time on my own was an idea that just, I knew I should spend time on my own, but I had no desire to. Why would I want to? What joy would that bring me? I could spend time on my own to recover from just exhaustion, but that was like a negative, spending time myself in a negative way, kind of. But to spend time with myself in a positive way, that's a really recent breakthrough for me.
Yeah. So when you're self-facilitating and sort of spending time with yourself, self-facilitating, you mean?
Just on my own, just generally, to spend time with myself, go out and I had a day at the beach recently on my own and absolutely loved it. And I just wouldn't have done that before. I just wouldn't have, I just wouldn't have. It's a combination of giving myself permission to do that, take time out of all the other things I could have been doing for other people or for work or the house or whatever, but also just having that time alone and enjoying it is completely new revelation to me. And actually, I was just communicating with somebody with ADHD on social media today, and it was a man, and they were saying about that journey to self-love, self-acceptance, self-belief, and how huge that is, because I guess when you have ADHD, and probably if it's diagnosed, even if it's diagnosed, but definitely if it's not diagnosed, you just spend your whole time feeling on the periphery, on the outside. You just don't feel like you belong somehow. And so that self-love is kind of like you do belong. Suddenly you belong to yourself, and it brings a calmness into your life. It takes away that sort of frantic element, that searching, that unsettled, that hypervigilance. You're safe in yourself. And for me, that's just calmed me right down. Then that frees up. So part of ADHD is the emotional regulation. It is the what's known as rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I don't know if you've heard of that. And that's like I describe it like when you get on a roller coaster and you're sitting and you're waiting for the barriers to come down. Once those barriers come down, you're on that roller coaster, and it's an emotional journey, and you can't get off it, and it just feeds itself, and it becomes more and more intense, and nobody can really interrupt it. It kind of has to see itself through to the end, and it can be quite an exhausting process. And when it's finished, you kind of think, oh my gosh, what just happened? Did I just it's like you've been taken over by an alien, and you're sorry, and you shouldn't have said that, and you shouldn't have done this. but you have that moment before the barrier comes down to get off the ride if you acknowledge it. But with that self-worth, that feeling of self-worth and self-acceptance, my rejection sensitivity dysphoria has, or RSD is easier to say, has just calmed right down. The ADHD symptoms don't disappear, but they become easier to manage when you've got that headspace, that emotional space to see things in a calmer way. So it does just take away, the belief coding has just taken away, I don't know if it's taken away or added to my toolbox, really. It's taken away some of the noise, I think is the best way to describe it. The symptoms are all still there, the procrastination, the disorganization, the thinking of lots of things all at the same time. But it's hard to actually say that now without feeling positive about it. I've had a really ADHD day today, and yeah, I haven't got loads done, but I have been hyper focused and concentrating and loving what I'm doing, and really enthusiastic about it. And I have made progress. I'm planning retreats that will involve belief coding for people with ADHD and various other activities that will holistic like healing experiences that will come into it. So I've just loved planning that and thinking about it and problem solving. And that is where those are the strengths of ADHD, I think. But yeah, I can see the progress I've made. I feel happier in myself than I have done, ever really, because, as a child, as a teen, as a young adult, as a mom, I've always felt not good enough.
Yeah.
And now, not that I'm perfect, it's not that everything's in place, but that's okay. That's the difference.
Yeah,
It doesn't.
it's accepting that life isn't perfect actually sometimes as well. I think it's half of it. I always think that it's the difference between our expectation versus reality that creates the suffering. And so, sometimes we expect a lot of ourselves more than we should, just generally, I think, as human beings. And sometimes when you can accept the messy and accept that life is messy, and that perhaps you will, like you say, never be free of the symptoms of ADHD, or you might always have to work on your relationship with food, whatever it might be, but just kind of and acceptance is a funny word. I appreciate that. I have a discussion with one of my accountability buddies about acceptance, but it's kind of acceptance in the sense of that self-love piece of I accept myself and my journey. It doesn't mean that you can't attempt to do something about it. But it's just sort of, again, just kind of relaxing into the process.
Yeah, really. Definitely. Yeah, sort of witnessing really, and being curious about yourself and the process and life and your experience of it.
Yeah.
I thought of something else then, but it's completely gone on in my head.
It's all right. Yeah, and one of the things again that resonated with me in your story there is actually it's a very similar story to mine. I never felt like I fitted in, and all through these, and I literally said it to my daughter the other day. I was just like, I never fitted in anywhere. It's one of those things where I sort of had friends throughout the years, and different groupings, but like you said, always sort of feeling on the periphery somewhere, and kind of almost like in a bit of a daze and a haze, and not really knowing what I'm doing and where I'm going, and just kind of like rolling from one thing to the next. And it was me coming into coaching and now into belief coding that, and again, same as you, finding that self-love that's just changed everything for me. I used to be so worried about what people think, and I used to be very much a perfectionist, and I still have tendencies that way. I still want to do a good job, but it's not. It used to eat me, properly eat me, sleepless nights and everything. Whereas now, say even doing the show, coming on, doing messy in front of potentially, however many people ever watch this show. This is not something I would have done 10 years ago, and it's through having tools like these that it can really make a huge difference to us, isn't it? So And I think to find them any time of life, but to find them in midlife, again, I don't know about you, so I'm 45 years young, and so I was kind of 40 when I sort of found out about this incredible thing called life coaching that kind of changed my life. But I think that it is this time of life as well where we do start to reevaluate what's happening, isn't it, as well, and do we want to stay the same for the next half of life effectively?
Yeah, definitely having that reevaluation. And two things just came to mind then as you were talking. One is that bit about never being, that imposter syndrome that sounded like what you were describing, like never good enough. And it doesn't matter what people say around you. People can say that you're amazing, that you're brilliant, that you know, and it means nothing. It just doesn't touch you, because if you don't believe it yourself,
Yeah.
you just think you've tricked them, or they're lying, or they're just being kind. So I'm glad to be rid of that now. If people say something nice to me, I graciously accept and believe it. And the other thing that came to mind as well about that, when you're on the periphery and you're coping and you're trying to fit in, that masking, which children do so well, and then a lot of them at school, and then they have the meltdowns at home because it has to come out somewhere. And so then there's that contrast between home and school, and school make the assumption then that it's to do with the parenting, because the kids feel safe enough to have that meltdown at home, and so at school think, oh, the child's fine here, it's obviously down to you. I've just gone off on a different, but one thing I was going to say is that like as a teen in particular, college and uni, that masking, it was almost literal. I almost like, I would prepare my face before I walked in a room in terms of fixing the smile and knowing what I was going to say and how I was going to handle if, people didn't, or I didn't feel welcome by people, and, pretending that that was fine and I had something else to do anyway. And so there's all these rehearsed ways of behaving that, kids will be doing now every day at school, at college, at uni, and people look at them and think they're completely fine.
Yeah.
And they'll have no idea of what's going on inside. And I think that's something that it would be good if people could understand, that because people look okay on the outside, it doesn't mean they're not suffering and finding things difficult on the inside.
Yeah. And I think I'd like to think that things have changed a bit more now. I feel like we're being a little bit more open about our struggles, and things like one of the comments that we've got is about watching TikTok, and I certainly see a lot of people in my TikTok feed with ADHD and talking about ADHD and what they go through, what they do, all those kind of things, and so it helps to have that dialogue out there, I think, for again all sorts of all sorts of differences that people might have. And it's nice to see that we can like I say, a bit more open, I think, about things.
I know it's funny though, because people see things on TikTok, they resonate with it describes them, but then they often fear that others will judge them, but and assume that they've gained their knowledge from TikTok, which may or may not be the case, and that therefore that devalues. Obviously, you can't get a diagnosis through TikTok or
Not yet.
coaching or but why not have that awareness raised? It doesn't make it, why not have the information that's going to make you question and understand yourself? And I don't think people would resonate with stuff unless it actually was true for them. I was asked last night, I was doing an interview, and I was asked if I would relinquish ADHD if I had the choice, and I wouldn't. But I don't think it's something you choose. So it is me now, and I appreciate the opportunities and the people call them superpowers. I wouldn't say that, but I like the way my brain works now. But I don't. If it didn't work that way, I don't think I would choose to identify as ADHD. I don't know what the advantage in that would be for people, but people still think that others, or they've, especially, I don't know, parents are often judged as, I don't want to alienate people, but yeah, I think my personal opinion is that TikTok is a useful tool, and that
I think,
if you get information
yeah,
from
I
it
mean,
that
my
resonates,
view with anything social media is this, that you've got to look at anything that you see on social media with discernment, isn't it, really? There's goods and bads in all things in life, and some of it's for good and some of it won't end up being for good, I guess, isn't it? But anything that, to me, that brings awareness and allows somebody to like we said earlier, grow, explore something with curiosity, with love, that helps them find a meaning, a purpose, a connection, all of those things, then it's definitely all good in my book in that sense. And like I say, sometimes people just want to be seen and heard, isn't it? And if that's through a total stranger as well, that you're then resonating with, and then that could be a moment of connection that person wouldn't get in that day. So,
and it's just that, oh my goodness, it's not just me kind of thing. That's really powerful, and I can't see how that's a bad thing in any way, shape, or form. Whether there's the dialogue about, the narrative about people getting frustrated because when people say, oh, everybody's a bit ADHD or whatever. But the thing is, I do think people can relate to different people can relate to different ADHD symptoms. I guess it's what makes somebody have a diagnosis of ADHD is the whole package, so the whole range of traits, but also the impact it has. So, if you're losing things and it's just a bit annoying, but if you're losing things and forgetting things and it makes you feel like it's the end of the world because it's so overwhelming, then there's a difference.
And it is the level of impact, isn't it? And again, as with autism and any of on any spectrum,
any neurodivergence,
any neurodivergence, it is all on the spectrum, isn't it? From one extremes to another. But again, this is where, again, identifying ourselves uniquely and what we're going through, with or without a diagnosis, it's still about understanding yourself, isn't it? And how whatever it is, whether it is an actual ADHD diagnosis, or you've got some traits of ADHD, or you're ADHD curious, like you say, it's still about how you relate to yourself and the work that you then do on yourself.
I would say the people that I work with, probably 25% are diagnosed. Probably another 25% are pursuing a diagnosis, and the rest are either sort of self-identified or ADHD curious. But you don't need a diagnosis for it to be worthwhile getting support, and because it is just about finding yourself, it is just about understanding yourself and finding what works for you.
I love that. So I'm conscious of time. I could come on these interviews and talk forever, and then I realised that normally I try and keep my episodes to about half an hour, and we've taken up more of your time. So is there any last pearls of wisdom that you want to share?
I don't think there's been any.
If they are feeling like let's, for argument's sake, say I'm ADHD curious, what would you advise somebody to next step or first step to be?
ADHD curious, I don't know. I just feed off the sort of situation, really. I guess talking to somebody who does understand. It depends really on what you want to do. Do you want to ascertain whether you have got ADHD? Then it's a case of having a conversation with somebody that's got that awareness and that level of understanding. There's lots of questionnaires, which is what I did as my first step online. And so I looked at a questionnaire. There are about 40 different examples of how ADHD might be present. And I ticked every single box, and then I took that the doctors. So that was my first step, because I wanted a diagnosis, because I felt like I couldn't cope anymore, and I felt like something needed to change.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, having that diagnosis was important, sort of confirmation and validation. Not everybody needs it. Some people are quite happy just with that, gathering that kind of understanding. But yeah, come for coaching or belief coding. Help you on your journey. That's what my advice would be.
Yeah, no worries at all. Okay, well, we'll wrap it up. For anybody who is curious to find out more about Marie, so if you're watching live or one of the replays on Facebook, or so in the group on my page or profile, then I'll get Marie to drop her details underneath. And when this goes live on the podcast, Marie, I'll put Marie's website on there, so make sure that you check out the description box. And other than that, if you have got any questions for myself or Marie, then leave it under one of the videos and we will respond to you accordingly, won't we?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you so much for being here and on the show, and we will love you and leave you all this week, and bye for now.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget, if you want to boost your life and weight loss the AAA way, check out the relevant links for today's show in the description. Speak soon.